Toot and Norberline would like to welcome you to be your own therapist tonight with Alan Marsh. Alan has been a student of Lama Zopa Rinpoche and a member of Vajrayana Institutes since the beginning in the early 1980s, under the directorship of Venerable Roger Kusang. And he has had occupied various positions in the management committee and was a member of the board of FPMTA for several years. Thank you, Alan, for spending time with us on this side of the equator, and we appreciate it. Thanks.
That's good. Yeah, it's 11 o'clock in the morning here on Wednesday and quite cold. We're in the middle of winter. Probably very different over there. So yes, I am a very long-time student from Vajrayana Institute, and I was there when Roger set up the centre back in the early 80s. And so I've been a student for quite a long time. I started teaching drop-in meditation probably maybe 20 years ago. And then just recently, or in the last few years, I've been teaching Discovering Buddhism. And so I'm basically a student more than a teacher. That's the way I see myself. Also, I'll tell you that I've actually got a cold today. So if I start coughing, apologies. I'll just warn you in case something happens. So I've got my water here, all kinds of things. So hopefully it'll be fine. So the plan is to usually I start with just 5 minutes breath meditation for sort of calming us and setting the motivation and so on. And then I'll just introduce the topic, which I've chosen as rejoicing, the topic of rejoicing, which is one of the 7 limbs, the 7-limb prayer, very uplifting and powerful practice. So I'll just talk about that, and then we'll do a guided meditation on rejoicing. And then hopefully we'll have some time for questions and any comments, discussions after that. So so that's the plan. And if during any of the discussion or talk, people have questions, just please free to ask. And so that's the basic plan at the moment. So for the mindfulness practice, all we're doing is just breath meditation, breathing, and the main thing is to be comfortable. The spine is straight, and you can be sitting or lying down. Alan Wallace says it's just as relaxing and just as powerful to be lying down. Main thing is the body is straight, the body is relaxed. If the body's relaxed, then the mind is going to hopefully follow that and be in a receptive, calm state. So, and then I'll just give a brief motivation, do 5 minutes breath meditation, and then we'll do the talk on rejoicing. Okay, so that's it. Let's start. Right, so we just begin with bringing our attention inwards, just checking what's happening in our body, what's happening in our mind. Just becoming aware. Spending a moment to just appreciate how fortunate we are to be able to come together in this way and do some practice, study the incredible teachings of the Buddha. Our motivation is not just to improve our minds for ourselves, but also to benefit those around us, and ultimately to be able to benefit all sentient beings. And we just come into our body, just checking that we're comfortable, feeling the weight of the body on the chair or the floor, just adjusting if there's any tightness in the body. We can use the out breath to breathe out any tension in the body, to help us relax and let go. And then gradually just giving more attention to the breathing, the movement of the breath in the body. You can focus the breath either at the nostrils or lower down at the abdomen, or just watch the whole body moving with each breath. And while we're focused on the breath, as part of the mind is just watching us, checking, introspection, just making sure we're on the breath. And when we get distracted, we notice that, gently let go of that distraction and come back to the breath. Staying with the breath, the full flow of the in-breath, full flow of the out-breath. Okay, thank you. Just relax. Okay, so this practice of rejoicing, it's one of the 7 limbs. Probably familiar with the 7-limb prayer that we often recite before teachings. Covers things such as making offerings, confessing, requesting the teacher to remain and give teachings, dedicating, and rejoicing is one of them. And that's Lama Zopa Rinpoche says this is probably the most easy of all the 7-limb practices to do, and the most powerful, or the most effective. So it's just a matter of just a way of thinking. I'll just read a little bit of what Lama Zopa said in one of his teachings on rejoicing. He says it's very important practice, and we should do it each day as many times as possible. It's the easiest way to accumulate merit. So this idea of accumulating merit, all it is just cultivating the mind. In the simplest terms, it's thinking good thoughts and making a habit of thinking good thoughts. So it's actually a way of developing the mind and accumulating merit. Lama Zopa says it actually causes to have good luck. So in everyday life, good luck is seen as something as random. It's just happening at random. Something, if you win the lottery, that's just good luck. But in Buddhism, it's something that we cause by creating merit, accumulating various practices that make positive imprints on the mind. So just getting back to Lama Zopa's quote, by doing the practice, we can accumulate merit as infinite as space. Rejoicing increases merit, like investing $100 in the bank and then constantly receiving interest until we have thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, and then millions of dollars, compounding interest. So when we rejoice, the merit increases greatly. It says in the teachings that among the virtues or good karmas, the best one to practice is rejoicing. In other words, if we want to create good luck, rejoicing is the best way. So this obviously is very it's actually good for lazy people like myself, because as Lama Zopa says, it's probably the most effective and the most easy way of accumulating merit. So some of the benefits, it's said that Lama Zopa says that if we rejoice, there's kind of 2 paths to rejoicing. First of all, we rejoice in our own merit. It's very important to start with that, I think, because we don't want to be rejoicing in other people's good luck if we feel that we're having bad luck from that sort of point of being deprived. So we spend a little time, Lama Zopa says you can spend a whole session just doing rejoicing on your own good fortune. And that covers rejoicing on the fact we're born human, and we've got this incredible, perfect body, where we've been born in a place where we can find the teachings of the Buddha, and we've got time to practice the teaching. We've got centers, we've got teachers, and so on. So that's very important. And then we can also rejoice in our good deeds, things that we've done. We can rejoice in our fact that we've met the Dharma and we've doing some practice, trying to meditate, and also just things that we've done in our life that have helped others. Probably you can remember things where we've practiced some generosity and compassion, looked after friends or relatives or people in need. So that's the beginning of the practice. Then rejoicing in others' good fortune. 2 things. We rejoice in the good fortune that they're having as a result of all their good karma. And then we rejoice in the causes, the things that they do to create the good fortune. So it covers things like people having a successful relationship, people being very successful in business, things. Lama Zopa chooses the very interesting example of when you see people in very extravagant cars, big cars like stretch limos and so on. He says, don't feel that, oh, they're sort of wasting their money. You can think how wonderful that they've got this opportunity. They're doing something. They're spending their money in a way that's going to make, or they feel is going to make them happy. We should be rejoicing in the fact that they've got what they want. They've got their big car, they've got their big house and so on. So it's a way of overcoming jealousy too, if there's any tendency to envy people who are having some sort of very material worldly success. So just rejoice and think how great. They've obviously created the causes. They want to have this particular pleasure or this particular way of enjoying themselves. How great, they've got it. So he says that if you rejoice in the higher the person's level of attainment, who you're rejoicing at, the more merit you get. So if you rejoice in the deeds of the Buddha, for example, or our teachers, our gurus and so on, bodhisattvas, then we get much more merit from rejoicing in that than just an ordinary being. So if we rejoice, he says, if we rejoice in somebody whose mind is lower than ours, then we accumulate more merit than they accumulate. If we rejoice in, we see somebody making an offering or donation to a charity or a good cause, so we could accumulate more merit than they do if our level of attainment, mental attainment is higher. So if their level of mind is higher, Lama Zopa says, such as bodhisattvas, Buddhas, we accumulate a quarter or half of the merit that the bodhisattva does. So he says, to get an idea how much merit that is, it would take us non-bodhisattvas 15,000 years to accumulate the merit that a bodhisattva accumulates in one day. So this is just to impress upon us how powerful the practice is. If you're rejoicing on somebody who's a highly realized being. So he also says that if we rejoice in the good deeds that we do ourselves, we can actually, if we do it properly, we can attain more merit than the actual activity of doing the good deeds. So rejoicing in what we've done. So it's incredible practice, and it's one that, as he says, is definitely something that we should spend some time doing. He points out that you could do it without sitting on the cushion. We can rejoice in just, he says, particularly in the city, there's so many people going to coffee shops and buying expensive clothes and so on. He said you could just sit watching these people doing what they want to do, spending their money, and rejoice how wonderful that they're doing what they're spending their money in the way that they want to. He said, it gives the example of going to the beach, which we do quite a bit here in Sydney during the summer, and just rejoicing that people have this amazing merit to be able to enjoy themselves in such a wonderful way, and rather than thinking that they're wasting their time or whatever. So it's very good we can choose things that we may sort of, if we don't, not mindful about, we might think that they're wasting their money, like people who are spending millions of dollars to buy a very expensive house or buying, very expensive clothing and so on. If there's some area that we tend to think like that, we can change the way of thinking to rejoicing. And so rather than politicizing or thinking that they shouldn't have had that, sometimes, particularly with business people, there's a tendency to think that maybe they've been greedy, that's why they're so powerful and so successful and so on. So by just changing the way we think, we can make this incredibly powerful practice. Just looking, there's a wonderful, I'm just reading from some notes that, or transcript of teaching that Lama Zopa gave on rejoicing some years ago, which I downloaded from Lama Yeshe Wisdom Archive, wonderful resource. So just some of the things that we can rejoice. Other things, he says, education, people having a work, we're talking about university and so on, as well as Buddhist education, of course. People having very happy families and good relationships with lots of friends. People succeeding in business. And he says, once we focus on a particular activity, we can say, we can use the expression how wonderful it is as a kind of a mantra. He says, just hold the thought on that particular person or situation where they're having good fortune and think how wonderful, how wonderful, wonderful. He actually says you could keep it going for 21 how wonderful. So that's just one of his suggestions on how to do the practice. So, so that's rejoicing in other people's success. And then the other aspect is rejoicing in people who are actually creating their own good merit. So they could be helping others in the health sector. During the pandemic, we've had so many incredible stories about doctors and nurses risking their lives to help those with COVID. The incredible burden that's placed on the healthcare system, nurses and doctors and people just doing this unbelievable good work. So we can just think how wonderful that they're sacrificing their own probably health and own lives to benefit others. So the rejoice in those sort of worldly actions that help beings. We can also rejoice in holy, mundane beings, our fellow students who do retreats. Maybe we haven't got time to do long retreats, but when we hear of somebody at maybe a centre, good to think of a specific person or situation who's maybe doing a retreat, following some advice from the guru, doing some practice, and just thinking how wonderful that person is, what incredible merit they're accumulating, and by following that. And so that's another way. And then rejoicing in great beings such as His Holiness the Dalai Lama, the teachings that he's giving constantly now, particularly online, our own teachers, our own gurus, and just thinking how wonderful that we're alive at the same time that they are in the world giving these incredible teachings. How wonderful. So, so that's basically the practice. If we can remember the practice and do it when we're sort of out in the world, particularly when we sort of out, doing shopping and so on, seeing somebody having good fortune, good success, just trying to just transform the way we think about that and think how wonderful it is. I just got a little message saying my connection's unstable, so I'm just ignoring it and hoping that we can it happens sometimes. We just go through it. So that's the practice. Maybe if we it's getting on to 25 past. So I think, first of all, if there's any comments or questions, and then we can actually do the guided meditation. Anyone want to say anything? Comments or questions? Oh, okay, that's fine.
Well, what's the difference between? I've always I heard that it's not good to praise yourself, and so I'm wondering how rejoicing and praising yourself.
Yes. Look, I agree. Particularly in the West, there's kind of a bit of a culture sort of that you grow up with. You shouldn't sort of be big-headed or think that you're too great. But the more just reading the teachings on rejoicing, it's something that we need to learn to actually recognize our good deeds and rejoice in them. It helps, and so we're not actually developing pride. I think that's the other side, the opposite side to rejoicing in our good fortune. So pride, there's good pride and bad pride, but pride where we think that we're better than others. We're not rejoicing. We're not developing that tendency. We're giving ourselves credit for the fact that we, first of all, are born human. We do need an incredible amount of merit to be born a human being, and then all the other attributes we've got. And so I think it's probably something that we need to distinguish between thinking that we're better than others and just thinking that we've actually done a good job about something, and particularly when it comes to the Dharma, because I think His Holiness the Dalai Lama, and Robina is quite good at teaching this as well. She says in the West there is this a poor self-image that we tend to have, and that we're not able to, the teachings are so great and the Buddha is so, and we're not ever be able to retain that sort of situation. So we need to overcome that. And she said in the West, there's it seems to be more predominant thing in the West to have a poor self-image. She said when the Dalai Lama heard about this tendency in the West for people to downgrade themselves or feel bad about themselves, he's quite shocked. And he said that, this is something that doesn't happen in Tibet. People have a very positive image in Tibet of themselves. So he's been encouraging people to do practices, particularly that help overcome the sense of low self-worth and so on. And the other person who's good at the teaching that is Thupten Jinpa, who was His Holiness's translator. He's written a book called The Fearless Heart. It just particularly focuses on developing self-kindness and self-forgiveness. Fearless Heart by Thupten Jinpa. I'm going to do that practice next week, self-kindness, self-forgiveness. So I'll talk about that particular area as well next week. So yes, it's a good point, really good point. And when I first sort of saw the teachings on rejoicing, I thought that's a bit much, rejoicing on how good you are. But it's not, you're rejoicing on, while you're doing that, you're actually helping to see the good in others. Okay, you can, by seeing how fortunate we are to have this human body, we can see how fortunate others are. And so we can see others in a much more positive light as well. Yeah, it's a very interesting area, and good to notice it and then develop this. There's a quote from, I think it's Nagarjuna, says, if we haven't made peace with ourselves, then how can we help others create peace? Have to actually have the peace, feel good about ourselves before we can help others have that feeling as well. Okay, good. All right. So let's just do the guided meditation now. Let's just get in a comfortable position.
Ellen, Barbara has a comment.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was wondering what your thoughts are on rejoicing in non-human sentient beings. Kind of, I just sometimes see a non-human animal, and I just marvel at how wonderful they do with their own situation. Or
exactly.
I just find that's like, I feel a connection when I feel a rejoicing that just comes naturally. And I was wondering what you think of that.
That sounds wonderful. So we often do see that, like we see these amazing pictures of animals rescuing other animals, or mothers looking after another species, that in some wonderful wildlife documentaries have that, where a lion will look after the baby of another species, thinking that it's, I don't know whether they think it's their own or just because they have compassion or what. But there's definitely compassion and kindness in the animal world, definitely. So we can see that. Yeah, it's a good thing to actually. I think I just trying to think when I was reading for this topic. I think Rinpoche said something about that too. You can rejoice that animals somehow displays kindness to each other. So and of course animals. If you look at, I've got a friend next door who's using a guide dog. She's mostly blind, and the incredible devotion of that dog. It's just this wonderful relationship between her and the dog. She couldn't actually go to work. She couldn't really do anything in the world without the dog. So how that dog, you think of the karma of that dog too, to be able to do that. Surely they'll be reborn human in the next life. So good point.
I just, you're talking about, like the Western kind of low self-esteem, or that we don't tend to ourselves as well. I had 2 cats, and they were very closely bonded. And when the one passed away, because he was much older, I was so worried that the surviving one was going to not eat or just be disoriented because she relied on him. But I'm just so impressed. She went into shock for like about an hour, like she was, behaving differently. And then she just went on with her routine. She ate at her normal times, and she sleeps at her normal, like, I was just so impressed with how well she tended to herself, that she had like she kind of had a self-awareness that, she needed to take care of herself because he wasn't here anymore. So, I've seen people who are widowed, and they just fall apart. And here's my little cat who, she became a widow, and she's just wonderful. And then, I see our, I'm just talking about pets, but, I see our dog who wants to terrorize the cat all the time, and she knows she's not supposed to do it. And she's working so hard, like, I want to go bother the cat, but she will, you can see the effort that she's making. And I find so much joy in that she's trying to do the right thing that she knows she's not supposed to do. And then what you're talking about, like other species helping out, animals helping out other species, and being so devoted. And I don't know, I just can't, I don't know if I can find something more joyful than seeing that, like that there is this like a natural loving tendency without the kind of like the culture that we attach to all of our behavior. And so things get kind of sometimes disordered, and we don't know what we should do, and we don't know what's appropriate. And it's just so natural with animals. So I don't know. I mean, I know that, we see the human rebirth as precious and unique in its potential, but I also see so much potential in the non-humans as well. So
when you see those people, recovering from grief and so on, that's amazing feat to be able to overcome, loss of a partner and so on. So that I think that's a very valid object to rejoice about, subject to rejoice about. And some people naturally will see that, and because they're different, some people don't have to cultivate it; they'll just naturally do it. So, wonderful, good point. Thank you. Okay, so let's just do the practice, and I'll just guide you through it, and hopefully we'll not take too long to do it. Thank you very much. Okay, let's just start. Okay, we just get in a comfortable position, spend a couple of moments just focusing on the breath to calm the mind. So we begin our practice of rejoicing by beginning with ourselves, our own situation, our own good fortune. First of all, looking at the fact that we've born in this as a human being, what's called the perfect human rebirth, in a human body with a human brain, knowing that there's a potential to be born in other realms, the animal realm, the lower realms, the upper realms. It's said that being born human is by far the most auspicious. It allows us to actually practice, become liberated and eventually enlightened. Not only we've got a human body, we've been born in a peaceful country which allows freedom of expression and freedom of belief, of religion, religious practice. We have the Buddhist teaching have arrived in this country where we are in a form that we understand, a language we understand. We have centers teaching the Buddha, Buddhist teaching, Mahayana Buddhism. We have qualified teachers, geshis, lay teachers. And we also have an interest in the Dharma, something which is very rare. We must have come across the Dharma in previous lives to have this interest. We must have accumulated unbelievable karma in previous lives to have a human body and to be born in this place. We also rejoice in our acts of generosity, kindness, patience. We've done in the past, doing now, thinking specifically of things we've done that have helped others. Our family, our friends, strangers. Thinking of our Dharma practice. We've come across the teachings and we found that they resonate with our way of thinking. We can develop our interest in the Dharma limitlessly now. What an incredible opportunity we have. How wonderful. Extraordinary good fortune we have. What an opportunity not to be wasted. Now we can just move to rejoicing in others' good fortune, the results of their previous good karma. When we see good things happening to other people. And think of examples in our own friends and family, people who have obtained good education, obtained good jobs, had success in business, had good relationships, good families. Think how wonderful this is. How extraordinary. We rejoice. For those in the media, we hear about having great success, financial success, business success. How wonderful. So these are the fruits of their previous good deeds, having a good life, good relationships, a happy life, experience happiness. Now we can rejoice in the causes, those good deeds that these beings are doing and have done in the past. Beings who are being generous with their time, their money, making offerings to worthy causes. Think of the people working in very difficult situations in war-torn areas, the doctors, the human rights activists, people working where there's droughts or natural calamities. Unbelievable how we rejoice in their sacrifices, their good deeds. Particularly those working in the pandemic, COVID pandemic, both volunteers and paid professionals in the health sector, risking their lives, sacrificing their lives sometimes to help others who are sick. Whenever we hear of these stories, we should rejoice how wonderful what they're doing. We rejoice in their merit and their good deeds. Then we can particularly rejoice in the deeds of holy beings like our teachers. These are bodhisattvas or Buddhas who are working to help beings constantly in ways that we can never fully understand. His Holiness the Dalai Lama, our own gurus, our own teachers. How extraordinary that they're here on earth, only to help us, to help living sentient beings. Also rejoicing in great gurus and beings from the past, the great masters like Lama Zopa, Milarepa, Nagarjuna. We can think of those beings who are practicing in countries like Tibet, practicing Buddha Dharma, or Buddhist countries, both Theravada and Mahayana Buddhism. Beings in Dharamsala, visiting His Holiness the Dalai Lama, going to teachings, making offerings, and thinking particularly in our own areas, our Western countries, those beings we know around our centres, helping out at the centres. Thinking of particular individuals and friends we know. Maybe they're taking ordination, maybe they're doing retreats, filling the Guru's wishes. How wonderful what they're doing. So we can just conclude this practice by making a determination to create our own good luck by accumulating merit. And one of those ways is by rejoicing in other beings' good fortune, other beings' good deeds, as well as rejoicing in our own good fortune and good deeds. Dedicate to developing our own practices, 7 limb practices, developing our own compassion and wisdom so that we can progress along the path to liberation and the path to full enlightenment. Dedicating to that in order to benefit all sentient beings. Okay, thank you. Not quite finished. I just thought of there's a couple of things about rejoicing I thought might be worth discussing. How some of the things that are difficult for us to rejoice in, and thinking of things like rejoicing in people we've had. We can obviously rejoice in our own friends and family, and perhaps strangers, not so difficult, but enemies or people that we have problems with, it's quite difficult sometimes to rejoice. And I'm thinking particularly of like people we've had, like ex-partners who, for some reason, relationships broken up, and we hear that they've found another partner or they've had some good fortune and they're really happy. These are quite challenging situations to rejoice in, and it's because we've had this difficulty with that person. And so we should think, probably not, we should start with the easy ones, but it's good to think that eventually as we become better at our rejoicing practice, we can think that we might know people in our own world, our own life, who've had relationships that like divorced their spouses and so on, and then they've become friends. It does happen. So they're able to actually feel happy when that other person has a good relationship, has success in financial or whatever. So I thought that's more advanced. So equanimity, the practice of equanimity, where we try and see friends, enemies, and strangers as equal, would probably be a good introduction to the next step of then actually rejoicing when our enemy or our difficult person has success. So just thought about that. You probably think of, so the rejoicing that we can think of, which is most difficult, is probably good to keep in mind that we want to be able to do that eventually. There was this wonderful story of Thupten Jinpa. He works with like clinical workshops, trying in I think it's Stanford University in America, I'm not sure which university, and he studies how a Buddhist meditation, say on equanimity and compassion, how it affects his groups over a period of years. Okay, so very, very long-term studies, and he actually found that some of the groups that he worked in using equanimity to see the friend, enemy, and stranger as equal, and some of the success they had. There was a woman who always put her ex-husband as the enemy when they had to sort of think, try and equalize their attitude to friend, enemy, and stranger. And so she said that at the end of, I think it was 12 months, that instead of putting the husband in the category of enemy, she had just automatically put him in the category of friend. So it can happen over a long period of time. It's incredible. So I think probably his studies have been very closely looked at psychologists as well, so they can actually use that, not just necessarily Buddhists, but psychologists as well. Okay, so the other thing I thought in Western culture, we're brought up to compete, you know. Well, this could be a hindrance, I think, while we might find it difficult as Westerners to practice rejoicing. Right from school, we're taught that we should sort of win the race, particularly in this sort of capitalistic Western society, be better than the others, compete, be the best, and so on. So it's more this individual thing of individual success. So I think this is something that probably not so much in traditional societies, people living in say the Pacific Islands and so on, where I used to live I've been spent many years living in places like Fiji, Vanuatu, and Papua New Guinea, where the group is far more important than the individual. And I sort of suspect that they find the idea of rejoicing in other people's success, because it helps the group, easier than we might in our competitive capitalistic sort of culture. That's another possible thing that the Buddhist teachings might be slightly differently practiced in the West, might need to concentrate more in the West on this rejoicing practice. Can anyone think of something we shouldn't rejoice in, something that's not healthy, even though it makes somebody happy? What about the person who robs the bank and has, you know, great joy in spending all the money? Or I'm just thinking of silly examples, really. We know that this is not something we'd rejoice. Or actually,
you can rejoice. You can rejoice that they will have time to think while they're in prison.
If I just say it again, I didn't quite hear.
Oh, you can rejoice that they'll have time to think or meditate. And
okay, that they'll see their wrong ways, or they might come across the Buddha's teachings. Perhaps, yeah, that's a possibility. Okay. So I think that's about all I want to say. What I normally do when I just do the meditation at VI is I just read a dedication from Lama Zopa, which he's actually written just for the pandemic, you know, for this particular time where we've got such a lot of sickness in the world. So I might just finish with that if we could. Okay. So this is just reading words of Lama Zopa Rinpoche. However many sick sentient beings there are, may they quickly be freed of all sickness. May all the sickness without exception of transmigrating beings never occur again. And due to the merits of all collected by me and all the numberless Buddhas, numberless sentient beings, bodhisattvas, may all wars or sickness, famine, torture, poverty, economic problems in the world, all dangers of earth, water, fire, and wind be pacified immediately, and may perfect peace and happiness prevail in everyone's hearts and lives. May the Buddha Dharma last a long time, and may sentient beings in the world meet the Buddha Dharma and achieve enlightenment as quickly as possible, dedicating to that. Okay, thanks so much. That's it. Thanks, Shayla, for coordinating. Wonderful.
Thank you.
Thanks, Barbara, for being there. And I hope to see you next week, same time.
Definitely next week.
Yeah, take care.